Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're exploring something deeply misunderstood, the hidden architecture of emotional silence. We're talking about the invisible storm raging right behind a closed door.
Look, have you ever noticed a certain kind of person who, well, they just never tell you when they're hurting, right? They don't raise their voice. They don't fire off an angry text. They just go completely, invisibly quiet. Or honestly, maybe we need to ask, why do you do this? If you've ever retreated to some private room inside your own mind to fall apart completely alone, you've got to understand something right now. This isn't just a quirky personality trait. We're going to uncover exactly why this happens, and I promise it's going to change how you look at this behavior forever.
Okay, let's dive into this, because we need to shatter a massive misconception right out of the gate. When someone goes quiet, people almost always assume it's passive-aggressive. They think, oh, they're being manipulative, they're using silence as a weapon. But science tells us a completely different story. The person going silent isn't trying to control you or the situation. They're actually just retreating to the only place that has ever felt safe enough to fall apart in.
And that brings us to this absolutely crucial realization. The silence is not a strategy. It's a scar. This behavior is literally a survival rule heavily encoded by your prefrontal cortex to get you through what developmental psychologists call an emotionally invalidating environment. And hey, that doesn't necessarily mean extreme movie-level cruelty. It usually just means you had a consistent experience where expressing your pain was met with, dismissal or irritation.
Which leads us to the very first sign. You learned, somewhere along the way, that your pain was just too much for the room. And this didn't happen overnight in some big, dramatic explosion. It happened through quiet, slow accumulation. Like a dripping faucet. Maybe years ago you cried and were told to stop being so sensitive. Then later, you watched someone you deeply trusted just kind of look away when you shared something painful. Fast forward to recently, and you try to express a wound, but somehow you end up being the one apologizing for it.
There's this profound insight inspired by Brené Brown's vulnerability research. The capacity to express pain openly isn't a personality trait. It's a learned sense of safety. Those people you know who can just easily say, hey, I'm hurting, they didn't magically get a different set of emotions than you did. They just received consistent evidence in their lives that showing those emotions was safe. Your highly intelligent nervous system took in the exact opposite evidence, and it built a wall out of pure self-preservation.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the neurology behind our second sign. When you go quiet, you aren't empty. You are totally overwhelmed. Psychologists trace this to a neurological baseline known as interoceptive sensitivity. That's a fancy way of describing your brain's capacity to read the internal, physical signals of emotion. That tightening in your chest, the heavy feeling behind your eyes. In people who go silent, this internal alarm system is calibrated incredibly high. And the data totally shatters the illusion of the cold, unfeeling silent person. There's a brilliant study in the Journal of Emotion showing that people who suppress their expressions actually experience way higher physiological arousal than people who are yelling or crying. To put that into perspective, while a stonewalling person might look perfectly still on the outside, their heart rate can routinely spike over 100 beats per minute. That's the equivalent of a physical sprint. Your body is screaming. It's at its absolute loudest. You've just become an expert at the performance of stillness. Carl Jung actually had a name for this exact phenomenon. He called it the introversion of affect. It's this tendency to take all the chaotic energy of an emotional experience and direct it entirely inward. And you don't do this because you feel less. You do it because you've learned that the inside is literally the only safe place left to feel anything at all. You're not cold. You're carrying a massive turbulent storm behind a closed door. And you keep that door shut because you just aren't sure the person on the other side is actually ready to see the storm.
Which brings us to sign number 3, and honestly, the heartbreaking paradox of it all. It starts with what we call the burden belief. When you're hurting, your gut instinct is to hold it all inside because you truly believe your pain is going to destroy the relationship. But the tragic reality, this constant withholding creates this quiet, creeping distance. The exact silence you are using to protect the connection is the very thing slowly hollowing it out from the inside.
And this brilliantly captures our fourth sign. Because expressing yourself felt so unsafe out in the real world, your mind went ahead and built this vast, incredibly detailed hidden room for everything you weren't allowed to say. Think about it. You've completely rehearsed conversations you know you'll never actually have, right? This rich inner world is just packed with swallowed sentences and imagined responses. It operates as an escape hatch, a retreat that just feels so much kinder and way more controlled than the unpredictable reality outside.
But there is a really heavy cost to living in that safe inner room. It brings this profound, aching loneliness. You're existing in a dimension of your own emotional experience that literally no one else has ever been invited into. And that is one of the heaviest burdens a person can carry. You are detached. You aren't absent. You're just living entirely inside the rehearsed version of reality, the one where you finally said the hard thing and someone actually truly understood you.
Let's look at how this builds into sign number 5. Ultimately, you would rather slowly disappear than risk ending things loudly. The legendary psychologist John Gottman mapped out this tragic progression over 40 years of research. First, there's that accumulation of unspoken things we just talked about. That leads straight into physiological flooding. Completely overwhelmed, you retreat to a safe distance. You try to stay close enough to still love them, but far enough away to stop the bleeding. And eventually, it ends in slowly disappearing.
If this is hitting close to home for you, I need you to hear this loud and clear. You are not trying to destroy the relationship, you are trying to survive it. You're not stonewalling because you stopped caring. Actually, scratch that. It's the exact opposite. You are stonewalling because you care so much, and you have absolutely no safe way to say so. Your nervous system is slamming the door shut in a desperate act of self-preservation. So the crucial point is, what happens now, right? Underneath all the slow withdrawals, all the rehearsed conversations, all the exhausted attempts to protect others at your own expense, what are you actually waiting for? Well, this brings us to our 6th and final sign, the absolute emotional climax that explains everything else we've covered in this explainer today. You are waiting for someone to ask the right question. And no, not just a passing, hey, how are ya, or are you okay? You're running an ancient, quiet test. Deep down, behind that flawless performance of stillness, you're waiting for someone to sit close enough, stay long enough, and look carefully enough to say, I see that something is there, and I'm not going anywhere. You're just waiting for undeniable evidence that it is finally safe to speak.
This connects so beautifully to psychologist John Bowlby's work on attachment theory. He showed us that the most foundational human need is a safe harbor. It's a place where being your messy, unmanaged self won't cost you a thing. So many people who go quiet grew up without that harbor. The love they got always came with unspoken conditions. So this silence, it doesn't just magically disappear with a self-help book. It breaks through the slow, steady accumulation of evidence in real, everyday relationships that saying, I'm hurting, is not going to cost you the person you love.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one incredibly powerful truth to hold on to. The quietest people are very often carrying the loudest lives. All that invisible weight you carry, every single unsaid thing, every swallowed sentence, it is not evidence that you were damaged, not at all. It is absolute proof that you feel deeply, that you care profoundly, and that you have been fiercely protecting the people around you in literally the only way you knew how.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. Look around at the people in your own life. Who among them has been waiting their entire life to be asked the right question? The next time someone you love goes quiet, I want you to remember the storm behind that closed door. Think about the safe harbors you can create for the people you love. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning,